Is blindness a barrier? No.
Is deafness a barrier? No.
Are mobility, learning, cognitive disabilities, speech impairments and others, or even a combination of them, barriers? No way. Lack of accessibility is.
Welcome to Web Accessibility for All.
Follow the blind. This journey starts now.
Let's face the music. When a deadline approaches or a sprint ends, we often prioritize the cut-off over quality. It feels like a time saver until the zombie bugs inevitably wake up. And believe me, when those issues are about accessibility, it only gets worse.
So for the mobile version, I want these extra filters to just tuck away off to the right. When you need them, you just hit a button and the panel pops back in. It keeps the whole thing looking super sleek and saves us a ton of room.
Wait, but when that panel is off-screen, is the content actually hidden from the browser? I mean, if we just use CSS to move it, a screen reader is still going to find all those checkboxes in the middle of the main page. It'll be a total mess for navigation.
Wow. Can't we just, throw a mask or something on it? I mean, it's totally off stage anyway.
Look, a keyboard user will tab into a void, where they can't see their own focus indicator.
Maybe we need to restructure the HTML skeleton?
Restructure? What? Guys, that sounds like we're making a huge deal out of a simple little slide out.
Don't forget the deadline. We have the Stakeholder demo on Friday.
Great.
Is there any way we can handle this later?
I think so. We can circle back to this. I don't know. Next release?
We talk a lot about technical debt, but there is a specific type of debt that often goes ignored until it becomes a crisis. It's not just a metaphor, it's a technical reality. It's accessibility debt. Welcome back to Web Accessibility for All.
The hidden accessibility costs your team is already paying.
Simply put, accessibility debt is the sum of all the barriers you've left in your product. It's every missing alt text, every keyboard trap that were skipped to meet the deadline. It's about screen reader validation. It's unverified error handling as well. Unlike most technical debt, accessibility debt has immediate impact on the users. Your site might still function for many, but not maybe for a screen reader user or someone navigating with a keyboard. And what about users with cognitive disabilities, low vision, motor impairments, or even situational impairments?
Why accessibility debt keeps growing over time?
Most teams treat accessibility as a nice-to-have for the next sprint. But here is the reality. It grows because inaccessible components get reused, copied into design systems, and extended, so every new feature inherits the same flaws.
Building features on an inaccessible foundation.
In the end, accessibility debt is also the absence of systems that prevent those barriers in the first place. You don't know it is a problem until you try to add a new feature and realize the foundation is broken.
So where does this debt actually come from?
Accessibility knowledge gaps in design and development.
We are taught to make things look good or run fast, but battle-tested semantic HTML patterns and ARIA understanding are always part of the curriculum. When neither side knows what good looks like, debt is inevitable.
Surprise!
How poor team communication creates accessibility debt.
Picture this. A designer hands over a mockup that's missing accessibility specs. The developer realizes they don't know how to code the interaction for a screen reader user. So instead of a quick fix, this turned into several meetings, a Slack thread, and 2 weeks of researching. Eventually, the deadline looms so large that everyone agrees to just ship it and fix it later.
Agile deadlines versus inclusive user experience.
Yeah, in agile teams, velocity is king. The pressure to hit a sprint goal often forces them to ignore even well-known accessibility issues.
Wow. The accessibility challenges of legacy code.
Also, working with old code is hard. When you are dealing with code from 5 years ago, it's easy to add another layer of messy code than it's to refactor the foundation.
How design systems spread accessibility problems at scale.
Most modern teams don't build interfaces from scratch. They build from design systems. But when a component is inaccessible, you don't have one bug. You have a multiplier. It's been copied, forward and slightly modified across multiple teams. This is how accessibility debt compounds at scale. And here's the real cost. Fixing a single page level issue is one thing. Fixing a broken component inside the design system, well, that's a coordinated change. You are not just updating code, you're triggering regression testing, versioning changes, team migrations, and sometimes breaking existing implementations. So teams hesitate. They say,
let's not touch it right now. We might break something.
And just like that, it's no longer a bug. It's part of the system. And the longer it stays there, the more expensive it becomes to remove.
Third-party tools, stakeholder pressure, and accessibility risk.
Picture this. You'll have a stakeholder point at a specific third-party solution and say,
we're using this because it fits our brand and everyone else in the industry is using it.
At that moment, designers and developers are put in a defensive position. They have to take this tool and try to force it into their own style boundaries.
Using accessibility spikes before integration.
The only way to stop this is to change the process. Instead of just making it work, teams need to run a spike.
A spike is a time-boxed investigation used when a team lacks the knowledge required to estimate or complete a specific work.
A spike with clear accessibility acceptance criteria gives the developers and designers the space to actually vet the solution before it's integrated. By doing this, you can go back to the stakeholder with a clear picture.
The financial and legal cost of accessibility debt.
In software engineering, there's a well-known rule.
It's significantly cheaper to fix a bug in the design phase than in production.
Industry studies estimate fixes can be an order of magnitude more expensive in production. Some studies put the multiplier at 30 times the cost.
The real cost of fixing accessibility problems in production.
If a fix takes 1 hour in design, it might take 30 hours of dev and QA and deployment time when it's live. With accessibility, that multiplier can be even higher. Then there's a legal landscape. accessibility is no longer a suggestion, it's a legal requirement.
Accessibility debt and lost market opportunities.
This is probably the most visible cost. When you ignore accessibility debt, you are effectively telling 1/5 of your potential market that their money isn't good at your store.
Hidden technical costs and long-term accessibility risk.
The principle is the work you skipped. The interest is the low revenue, the legal risk, and the extra hours you spend. And trust me, the interest always gets paid.
Why partial accessibility fixes still fail users?
From a compliance standpoint, a partial fix that still blocks access doesn't reduce your liability. If a weak fix still prevents a user from completing a purchase or accessing information, you're still in violation. Think of it this way. If a building has 10 steps and you only build the ramp that covers the first 3, the building is still inaccessible. You don't get partial credit for the 3 steps you fixed. In a courtroom, a broken ramp is just as much of a barrier as the stairs themselves.
Building accessible products without creating more debt.
Shifting accessibility left in the development process.
If a feature doesn't have documented focus states or hasn't passed the basic keyboard tests, it isn't done. It doesn't move to production. Period.
Creating shared accessibility ownership across teams.
We need a shared responsibility model. Let's say designers own the color contrast and focus flow. Developers own the semantic HTML and Ariel, and QA owns the manual screen reader checks. When everyone owns a piece of the process, the debt is nowhere to hide.
Accessibility governance in CI/CD pipelines.
You should be setting up automated checks in your CI and CD pipelines. They stop the most obvious debt from ever hitting your main branch.
Layered accessibility testing strategies.
A mature accessibility workflow needs multiple layers of testing. After automated checks, then comes integration and component-level testing. This is where you verify things like:
does the modal trap focus correctly? Does the drop-down behave with a keyboard? Are state changes announced properly?
And finally, the layer that most teams skip: manual testing with assistive technologies. That means navigating your product with a screen reader, with just a keyboard, at 200% zoom, or in a mobile device in less than ideal conditions.
Accessibility metrics.
You can shift left, you can test, you can build accessible components, but if you are not measuring accessibility, you are still operating in the dark. That can be as simple as tracking accessibility issues in your backlog, tagging them, prioritizing them, making them visible in sprint planning, or as structured as defining metrics like:
what percentage of our components meet accessibility standards? How many accessibility issues are we carrying sprint over sprint? Are we adding more debt than we're paying down?
Once you can see the debt, you can manage it. You can make informed trade-offs. You can justify the work.
The human impact of accessibility debt.
So, at the end of the day, accessibility debt is just a professional way of saying barriers. For a real person, that debt represents a loss of independence. When we choose to fix it later, We are choosing to exclude someone today. One small decision to build it right today saves you a mountain of work tomorrow. And more importantly, it keeps the digital world open for everyone. Thanks for listening to Web Accessibility for All. I'll see you in the next sprint. Week. Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us today. Subscribe for a new challenge next week. And don't be shy. Leave us a review or ask your accessibility questions online. See you next week for another episode of Web Accessibility for All.